Welcome to Authors Chaos. Y'all know me. I'm Sarah SF Rogers. I'm super stoked you're here. And with me today is Daniel.
I'm DL Golden. I am the co-host of Authors Chaos here, and we are not professionals at this, and the advice that we give is just out of our personal experience. Take it with a grain of salt. Don't go betting on any of that. But we are happy to have you here, and hoping that we can give you some information that'll be helpful to you.
Yep, and just know we will post all of our links in the description on YouTube, and it will also be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. So you can find us, you can find Daniel's book. It's great. But today we wanted to talk about advice that we've seen on social media.
Yeah, there is a lot of that advice floating around out there. I will let SF Rogers start out here, but we have got a lot of advice popping around. We have Ruth saying she cannot hear us. Looks like audio volumes are okay.
So anyway, some of the advice that we have seen, especially me. So I am in my first drafts. For those of you who don't know, I don't have a book released yet. I only literally have a first draft out there. But I have been on Book Talk for the last, I don't know, couple of months because of JC Bryce and DL releasing their books and having their own TikToks, and I kind of just joined the Book Talk community just to kind of get a feel for what was going on. And I ran across a bunch of super supportive things. So people who were like, hey, if you're an indie author, like these are 5 steps that I like recommend. And it also helped that I had you, and I had JC saying, hey, like just write your story, like just get your story out there. Don't listen to the naysayers, blah, blah, blah. Within the last week or so, I have run across videos where they're, in my opinion, nitpicking some of the things for like your margins on the edges of your book, or like where your chapters start, or where you have a blank page between like your very first title page, and then you have a blank page between your maps, and then your content and whatever. And I found myself feeling very bogged down with the rules of what a perfect book looks like. And I personally just want to like put this in the universe, right? That if you're doing this indie style and you're not going to try to do self-publishing, you're not like you're going to put yourself out there for agents and you're trying to get traditionally published. I don't have a whole lot of info for you because I'm not doing that, right? Like I'm not playing the game of that. But I think being self-published gives you the opportunity to like take the steps that you want to take to get your ideas out there. Is your book probably going to be the perfect the first time around? No. I saw several authors' copies, not only from UDL, but from JC, where maybe the picture on the cover didn't reach top to bottom, or maybe you got into it and your pages were a little bit wonky. I think that those things can be easily fixed in KDP. You can go in and you can readjust things as needed, as necessary. For the most part, as a reader, because I was a reader first. As a reader, I'm not nitpicky about margins. I'm not nitpicky about weird like font letters at the beginning of a chapter. I want to like basically put it out there that like if you're seeing all of this advice and you feel like all of these rules are like weighing you down, please just stop and like take a deep breath and realize that it's not the same for everybody, right? Like and I think DL will agree with me on that like there's a lot of things that aren't the same traditionally published to self-published, and there's not as many people out there being nitpicky as you think there are. So there's my little like shameless thing for what we're talking about.
And I would have to completely agree. When I was writing Origins, a lot of the writing process had gotten finished, and I got done with the rough draft, and sent it off to my editor, and she sent it back for getting those edits done. And then it went to formatting, and you go on Google and you go, okay, what size font should a book be? And Google goes, it should be Times New Roman 12-point font. That doesn't look pretty. Times New Roman is very much newspaper style writing. There are certain rules to like fonts and text that people follow. But a lot of the advice you're going to get, like on Google, is going to be that advice that is talking about traditional publishing. So you keep your book within this many words. You keep the page numbers down to this many page numbers. You put your font and spacing at 0.5 or whatever. All that stuff is really just for talking about traditional publishing. And yeah, it makes the book look better a lot of times when you follow certain rules. But if it's going to be that big a headache, if it's going to bog you down really bad and get you to where you're not going to publish your book because you don't know what you're doing with formatting, you can always reach out to someone to do that formatting for you if you're getting too overwhelmed. While that does cost money to do, you can get around that headache by paying for that service. But it is also something that you are capable of doing fully on your own.
Right. So Daniel, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're good. Go ahead.
What's one piece of advice that you've seen that like genuinely helped you, that you either got from JC or from TikTok or wherever? What's one piece of advice that like helped you on the way?
The best piece of advice I got from anybody is just to put the work out there. It's never going to be perfect. That's the place where a lot of people get really stuck. You reread the same chapter 14 times. And you're like, I hate this. I don't like how I wrote this. I don't like how this sounds. You tend to be more critical of yourself than people are going to be of you. And so the best advice I've gotten is just to write. Put it down as is. You can go back and fix it later, but don't expect it to be perfect even by the end. I know now that I opened Origins the other day to look for some piece of information to write from the second book, and I realized there was a formatting error in there. I can't go back and fix every little formatting error that I find this late in the process. At some point, if I release a second edition and I want to fix it, I will. But don't get bogged down so bad that you never release the work just because you're so afraid of making a little mistake. If it's grammar or commas or something like that, most lay people are not going to notice that. Editors are going to notice that left and right because that's what they're paid to do. But lay people are not going to realize that you missed a comma or put a semicolon where it's not supposed to be. And so I guess the best piece of advice I've gotten is just to put it out there. Whether it's good, bad, ugly, any feedback you get on that, you can grow from and improve on. It's not a set in stone process like traditional publishing is, where once it's out there, it's out there. You can always pull it back down and make edits later if you have to, but don't let that be the thing that keeps you from doing it. So what about you, SF? What would you say the most important piece of advice you've gotten has been?
So my favorite piece of advice, and I got it both from you and JC, because I was stuck in this place where I didn't know, like, I knew where I wanted to go, but I didn't know how I was going to go about it. And I remember I told you and I told her, and I don't even remember where we were, but we were at a family function, and I told you, I was like, I just don't even want to write. Like, I don't have anything I want to put down. I don't know what to do. And you and her both kind of looked at me and you were like, if you don't feel like writing, like you have writer's block and you don't feel like writing, don't write. And like your advice was like, if you write in that moment where you're like dreading doing it, or you don't have an idea of where you're going, when you go back during first edits, that's going to be one of the first things that gets cut, because there's no passion in what you put on the paper. And we talked about it with Perky last week, of like, you get sat down and you get into the flow, you might not really be feeling it, but at the end you've written 10,000 words. Well, that's a whole 2 chapters, right? And you go back and you go, oh, these 2 chapters they're just not good. Like, I don't this is not the vibe, like this is not what it is. So the best advice I got was like, if you don't feel like it, just don't do it. And I think
Right.
that's another thing about self-publishing. We don't have the deadline to have something done at a certain time so that
Hmm.
we're out there, right? Like we can go at our own pace. And if I go for 2 weeks and I don't want to edit because I can't look at the story anymore, then that's my own thing, right? And I need to step back and I need to not skim it. I need to actually read it for the edit. So that's probably the best piece of advice that I ever got, because I personally put a lot of pressure on myself to just keep going, just write. Like you have to sit down and write. When in reality, like, no, if I don't feel like it, I'm just not gonna do it.
Right. No, I completely agree, and I gave you that advice, so of course I agree. But
Right.
the thing you realize pretty quick when you have writer's block is that you can force it. You can push through it and you can
Mhm.
make words go down on the page. But it may end up being just hot garbage by the time you're finished. And there's no point in putting all that effort into it when you're really not certain of how you want the things to go. You and I are very much pantsers
Right.
when it comes to letting stories just flow.
Oh yeah.
And if the story is not
Mhm.
flowing on its own and you're forcing it, it ends up not sounding correct. And you're just going to have to go back and fix it later. Take a step back, consume something else, take a breather. Some inspiration will come to you at some point and you will fix it, whether that be 2 days or a month later. You're not on a traditional publishing schedule. And
Right.
you have the time to take and say, okay, I can push this back just a little bit so that I get the thing out that I want to get out of it. I would
Mhm.
say.
For sure. I I also think another piece of advice, and I just saw it today, was someone was asking like, how do you overcome writer's block? And one thing that I really picked up from you were like, partake in other forms of art, right? Like go take in other forms of art, which is great advice. Like that's great advice. For me, it was I needed to get out into sunshine and fresh air. So the
Hmm.
minute I got out, like we went on a hike and we're walking, and the minute we started walking, like Davy stepped on something and it crunched a certain way and my brain was like, "Oh my gosh, I know where to go. Like I know what to say about this scene next. Like I know now because I'm in nature." That works for me. So
Hmm.
I the partake in art, get out and just be in sunshine or be out in nature somewhere. Even I told a lady on a comment on TikTok this morning, I was like, just go to your backyard and like just sit. Like just go sit in your backyard and let the sun hit you and just don't think about it. And eventually your brain is going to release that thing that it's knotted up in, right? Like
Hmm.
so just yeah, like just getting out and not, I think when you stress yourself out about it, it becomes one, not fun, and
Right.
two, more stressful than just enjoying the story that you're trying to get across. So,
Yeah, and I think
what's
that
the worst
that
piece?
go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I
No,
think that
you go
that
ahead.
is a good place to say that if you're not having fun with it, then something is wrong. Um, because ultimately, when you first start publishing stuff, especially, you're really not going to make money off of this quickly. And so if you're like, well, if I just get this out there, I'm going to be able to quit my job. I'm going to be able to do what I need to do. I'm going to be able to do all this stuff. That may not necessarily happen. Do not stress yourself out about that. If you're not just in love with the story that you're writing, it's not going to be a joy to write in the first place. You need to step back and look for an idea because you love the form of writing, not because you're going to make money off of it or because it's going to be this big break for you. That's not really what indie
Right.
publishing is about. It's about getting the stories out that you want to tell, and that's a big deal in and of itself. Sorry, I did not mean to interrupt you there. I just had to get that out there.
No, no, I interrupted you. I'm so sorry. And I'm going to add to what you just had to say. If you're not having fun writing it, your readers aren't going to enjoy it either.
Yeah.
They'll pick up on the vibe they'll pick up on the vibe of the writing. And they will. And that was one thing we talked about with my villain. Like, I wrote one scene about him and I literally despise this man, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's a part of me that even now thinking about him, I'm mad at this character. And I know, right, eventually he has what's coming to him coming.
Mm-hmm.
But because of my anger toward the character, a reader is going to pick up on that. A reader is going to pick up on, oh, wait, like, he's not just kind of a villain, he's a villain. Like, he's a bad guy. And I think when you're passionate about the thing you're writing about, if you're not passionate, you're not having fun, it does definitely come across as not enjoyable.
Yeah, it's just not organic.
So,
Yeah, I
it's not.
completely agree.
So, what I was
What
going
was
to,
your question?
what in your opinion, I will preface that. In your opinion, what was the worst advice you may have seen scrolling on Book Talk or on Instagram or wherever?
Um, the worst piece of advice that I've seen online from anybody, and it may not be advice as much as it is just an opinion, it's that a book has to be a very specific length, or else it is not considered a novel. I How many times I agonized over my page length for my first book for Origins. This is really short. This is shorter than other people's. And roughly it was 70,000 words. It's not the longest story on the planet. But a lot of people online will tell you your page number doesn't matter, your word count matters, and your word count has to be 70,000 to 100,000 words. If you're below that, no one's going to want to read it. If you're above that, no one's going to want to read it. I think that the truth about any story at all is that stories are as long, or narratives are as long as they need to be to get their story across.
Right.
If that's 200,000 words, yeah, that's going to be a lot of words for a reader to get through. But if you need those extra 100,000 words on top to get your story across, to get that out there, you can't get bogged down and say, well, I'm just going to cut it short by 100,000 words. That doesn't work.
Right.
And I figured that pushing my story, filling it full of fluff and things to make the word count longer, was not going to make the story a better story.
Mm-mm.
It's just one of those things that don't concern yourself with how long a traditionally published book has to be. There are traditional publishing companies that are like, if it's not 70,000 words, we won't read it. And that's
Right.
okay. That's their prerogative. They're paying for that, right? And so if you have a story and you're like, oh, it's a 50,000 word story, but I don't think that's long enough to put a book out, you're paying for the printing cost is going to be higher when your book is longer. If your book is short and you're only like at a 100-page book, it's going to be cheaper for you to produce and cheaper for you to get copies out to people. That's all you need to be worried about is,
Mm-hmm.
did I tell my story from A, B, C, D? Did I get from beginning to end without an issue? If I didn't, you need to continue to add more. If you felt like you had to leave a bunch of stuff out because your story was too long, you may want to go back and look at that stuff. The story is for you to get out to people. You need to put in what you believe is going in there. It is not traditional publishing. Put out
Nope.
what you're passionate about and what you feel the story needs to have in it. That is my
Oh, yeah.
advice. And like I said, the worst piece is just acting like it has to be a specific length, otherwise you're not some kind of writer. That's just not true.
Right.
And so what about you?
I think for me, I think for me, it's you have to write, if you're writing romance, you have to have extra spicy scenes. And while I can agree that in adult relationships, because my books are adult, they're not young adult, they're adult, because they're adult relationships, there are interactions between adults that happen. They happen. They happen in my book. I'm not writing smut. There's a place for smut. Okay? But not every romance has to be that. And I will die on that hill. of it can be an adventure romance, and it can be the characters can be very passionate for each other, and you can write them passionately and not be a certain book that now has movies that is literally just smut. And I think anybody who's read any books will know exactly what I'm talking about when I say the book that now is all movies and all of that jazz. But like,
Mm.
I hate the trope in romance that it has to be extra spicy. Like, it feels very pigeonholed, and it feels very because I'm a woman, I have to write that way. It's almost expected for me to write that way, when in reality, like, no, I wanted more to tell the adventure
Hmm.
than the romance part of it. So it is a high fae adventure. There's romance sprinkled in, but I do not consign myself to the pigeonhole that as a woman I have to write that certain type of romance. And there are people who that's all they read. Congratulations, you're reading. I'm so proud of you for picking up a book.
Yeah,
Just
nothing wrong with
personally for
that.
me,
Yeah,
it's not just not where I want to be pigeonholed to. So,
yeah.
yeah, that was probably the worst when I started telling people I was writing romance. Now, I've seen a lot about formatting your book,
Yeah.
and there has been several videos that I've seen where people are nitpicking where your chapters start, on the left or on the right page. And I'm just gonna, for all you authors out there who are listening, I'm just gonna tell you that as an avid reader, I couldn't care less if a chapter starts on the left or the right hand side of the page. I don't pay attention. I just read the dang book. Okay? So, if you are scrolling on the TikTokies and you see a video that says, if your pages all start on the left, you're wrong, I'm here to tell you that's an opinion. Just like all of this on our podcast is our own personal opinions, but it's still an opinion. If your chapters all start on the left, or if your first chapter starts on the right and everything else starts on the left, congratulations, you have a book. Like, that's how I
Right.
feel about it. And there's my little rant for formatting things. And I get it. There's editors out there who are like, hey, this is never going to be traditionally published. Lucky for you, I don't like the red tape and the rules that come with traditional publishing, which is why I'm going indie.
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
I agree. Formatting is very important. But you don't have to consign yourself to format it a certain way just because that's the way it's always been done. There are applications on like the computer that you can put your book into, like Vellum, that can help you
mm-hmm.
format your book. Formatting is difficult, and it's honestly, for me, the most
Yeah.
annoying thing to do. But
Yeah.
you don't need to concern yourself with, oh, is this going to pop up on the right page number or the right page side? No one who is just a standard reader is going to care. There are some people who it bothers, and that's okay. They're welcome to that opinion. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter so long as your story is engrossing enough to keep people's attention.
Right. Right. I agree with you on that. I'm going to have to pick your brain on formatting too. You and JC,
It is a
cuz
nightmare.
getting to that getting getting
It's
So
so
what
bad.
so about like the formatting. Is
Mhm.
it just hard because the programs that you used are hard to use, or is it hard because you've written it all out a certain way and then you have to go through and like reset it?
I think that it's difficult because I'm using Word, for example, and Word is not the most intuitive thing for formatting after you're done. Word essentially works like it automatically thinks you're formatting a paper for like school. And
Yeah.
so it types like you would do that, like an article or something. And so when you go in, you change the page size down to your 5.5 by 8.5 or whatever size you selected. All of a sudden, your page numbers get a lot longer and your stuff moves automatically. If you've started your formatting process correctly and used page breaks, like at the end of your chapters, to form onto the next page, instead of hitting enter like a fifth grader over and over again until you're on the next page, you're okay. You won't like jump really big. But like the biggest issue I ran into with formatting with Word is like getting the page number to start on the first page of the first chapter. So like I have a map at the beginning of Origins and a table of contents and my copyright stuff at the front. And I didn't want my page numbers strewn across those pages because they don't add to the actual count of the book. So figuring that out was a headache because online it says do this, make a section break, fix it here, say start at page 1. For some reason, it doesn't work like that every single time. I did eventually get it to work, but it's a headache. Personally, I think I'm going to purchase an editing software. Vellum, I think, will run you $250 as a one-time purchase. And then you have it for every book you write after that. And that allows you to give your little beautiful watermarks at the top of your chapter starters and allows you to format it in an interesting way that isn't as complicated as just trying to format a Word document. I think that the only reason it's a nightmare is because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have a lot to walk me through that.
Right.
And I think you can format inside the Kindle app where you like turn it into a KDP file that you can upload. But it looks so strange to me to format it that way for an actual book. So I actually just went through and formatted it with Word, and it was a headache. I would recommend investing in some kind of software to do it, or if you know someone who has that software, to have them help you with it.
So JC had been looking at Scrivener. I don't know which way to pronounce it. Sorry to all y'all if I'm pronouncing it wrong. But it's a pretty cool setup if you're like wanting to keep all your characters in one space. I know she, like you said, you go and change the page margins and it all of a sudden shoots your book from 150 pages to 340, and that's exactly what happened to mine. So she came and she changed my margins, and my book went from, it's almost 200 pages to almost 400. And I was like, I wrote a lot of words. That was a lot of words. So I don't know. I'm waiting on notes from betas to get back and stuff. But I think this next time for the next book that I start, I'm going to start it in Google Docs. And the only reason why I say that is because I can see notes in real time when they're reading it. So they can leave me a comment. Like when I send them the link, they can highlight something and leave me a comment that, hey, this doesn't make sense. Or, hey, you have a plot hole here. Where right now, I'm just waiting on all these Word documents to come back that I'm going to have to re-download and save to my computer and pull them up side by side. And while I think that's great for a first draft, I also know that for the next one, I don't want to deal with having 17 copies of my book with highlights and commentary written in it when I could just send out a Google Doc and they can be like, oh, hey, this doesn't make sense. Oh, get it, girl. It just looks like it will make it easier.
You may just want to save an extra file version in Google Docs, like after you've typed it in Word, because Google Docs is so finicky for typing stuff sometimes. It just doesn't catch stuff in the way that Word can sometimes, and I don't even know how to explain that. I don't like it very much. But I would maybe type it and then import it into Google Docs, and that way you can have that live feedback. But there are all kinds of services you can use. What other services have you used when working on your book?
Right now, this moment.
Like anything that you've used. Yeah, but like, have you been using something to keep track of your timelines, to keep track of anything like that aren't the
Daniel,
Totally pantsing it, huh?
Here's the thing. Do you remember you and I had a conversation, me, you, and Alaya, about how
Hmm.
I started this book on pen and paper? I
Yes.
have notebook papers strewn about my house that have character things or timeline things. And here's the thing. I just pick up a piece of paper and I go, "Oh, yep, that's the one I need." Luckily now it's all in a notebook. But yes, I'm very archaic in that because when I think of it, I just want it down. I don't want to have to put a note in my phone. I don't want to have to pull up I just want to get it out. So when I started, my characters, like my character descriptions are on literally, I think, envelopes that I had that were just sitting, and I was like, "Oh, this is the character. Oh, this is the character." So, and now like I have a character sheet that I typed in Word from those things to kind
Hmm.
of help me keep track of everybody's names and eye colors and all of that jazz. But no, I don't have anything like keeping track of my timeline. I could probably use something like that,
Hmm.
probably. But for the most part, because I don't know, because it's my imagination, it's my world, I'm gonna say I don't forget anything, and then I'm gonna get my notes back and be like, "Hey, you left all these things out." So, probably is something that I need to look into, though.
Well, I completely agree. I have my phone is so full of notes on my notes app of, oh, here's the character description, here's what I said, because I'll go back and I'll accidentally change an eye color or something when I wasn't trying to.
Hmm.
Um, but I did notice that when it came to writing my second book, Odyssea, I have had to keep track of my timeline really, really bad. And I'm having to go into what happened pre Origins. Um, and so I've
Hmm.
had to start using a service to do that. And I've used World Anvil, I think is what it's called, online.
Okay.
Let me see really quick. I might even be able to share it on here.
You might.
Let's
I
see.
think you can hit the share button.
It doesn't seem to want to let me, but worldanvil.com, it allows you to type in historical events and set up eras and timelines and things like that that can
Hmm.
help to justify when things happen, because I've noticed that I
Okay.
started trampling over time streams of different characters by accident, and so I had to start
Um.
keeping track. Pantsing for your first book works really well, but as soon as you start having to write a sequel and you're having to keep track of dates and things, it messes you up a little bit. Um,
Right.
Another thing that I've used is Inkarnate for map
Hmm.
making. If you're making a map, and I think you've used this one, yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Um, it
I think I was the one who found Incarnate for JC.
I think she said that. Yeah, it works really, really well. And then you pay for the license to use all of their stuff. It's like $20 a year or something. And so you pay
Hmm.
for the license to use that, and then you can put the picture of the map in your book without any issue. And that is really helpful. Like I said, there are lots of services that you can use, but if you're having to keep track of your timeline and stuff, I would definitely look into um, that worldanvil.com. I think people use it to set up D&D campaigns generally, but you can
Okay.
use it to set up maps, or you can use it to set up character sheets or timelines, are the things that I've been really useful with. So if anyone's looking
Well,
for
I
a
will definitely
recommendation,
look into
that's
that.
all free. So
I will definitely look into that. That actually sounds super helpful.
right.
So we are actually super excited. We're going to have a couple of authors on. If you know an indie author that would like to come on here and talk about their books, talk about how they got started writing, please let us know. And I will link the email to reach out to us in the descriptions on everything too. We are actively trying to build a community full of support. Daniel and I have so much support right now. We have two more authors who are super, super close to us that we bounce ideas off of and we ask things of. And I know that at any point in time, if I'm having a rough time, I can reach out to any of them. And we definitely want to offer that community to all of you guys as well. And we want you guys to be able to reach out and be like, hey, I'm by myself out in this wilderness. We've been there. We know. They are actually walking me through KDP. They're walking me through like editors and beta readers and then ARC readers. I know JC just reached out to her first set of ARC readers for one of her new books coming out at the end of the year. And I just want to shamelessly plug that, like, if you're looking for an indie author community, a place where we're literally trying to just support each other. We're not going to nitpick you about your book. We're not going to nitpick you about your story or your characters or anything about that. We literally just want to cheer you on and maybe help you get your feet off the ground, because we know that the support that we've had has been crucial in getting us off the ground. So that's my shameless plug for that.
Yeah, we'll be putting out fillers on TikTok and stuff. I may set up a Google form for people to fill out if they're interested in doing that. We are going to be trying to record every Monday during the summer. After that, I'm not sure what the recording schedule will look like, but we will get that sorted out. We just want to make sure that we're giving people a platform that they can stand up and shout from the rooftops, hey, this is my book, this is what I'm about, this is how I got into writing. It is so hard sometimes to promote your book and to find people to talk to about your book. But we would love to hear about it. And we just want to offer that support out to anybody we can. So if you are an indie author that's interested in that, please reach out. Do we have an email address that you'd like that to go to, Sarah?
Yeah. So right now the email that you can reach out to is bookish, BOOKISH.girl, GIRL 2022 @gmail.com. And here pretty soon we'll probably have a more specific Authors Chaos Gmail, but that one right now will be the one to reach out to. And that one comes straight to me, so I will see it and we'll get you reached back out to. I know we already have two authors who have emailed us and shown interest in wanting to be on the podcast, so be prepared. We will have more guests on. It won't just be you looking at me and Daniel all the time. So
I think that pretty much covers all of it. As always, we have our website at runawaydaydreams.com. We should post all of this stuff in the description down below. I'm sure Sarah will put the email down there as well if you need it.
Oh, yeah.
You can sign up for our newsletter at Runaway Daydreams. You can follow us on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. Anything else you need to add, Sarah?
Tell them where to get your book.
Okay, so my book Origins has been out for a couple months now. 2 months coming on the 1st, but it is available on Amazon under Origins by D.L. Golden. If you like science fantasy, that is the place to grab it.
All right. Well, we are so glad you joined us today. And again, if you know an indie author, reach out. Let us know about them. Let them tell them about us. We'd love to have them on. Love to help them market their book to maybe a little bit wider audience. I'm SF Rogers.
And I'm D.L. Golden.